Hi, I'm Tao Ngo, the SVP Marketing at Uptempo. Each month, this MOPS Unplugged series brings some of the best minds in MOPS to answer one question related to marketing planning, budgeting, and work management. A little about Uptempo. We provide marketing planning software for enterprises with large marketing teams. Uptempo helps these marketing teams plan better, spend smarter, and execute with confidence. There's some seemingly basic questions that even the biggest brands in the world grapple with in many disconnected spreadsheets. How much budget do we have left? What is the ROI of our campaigns? Can we invest in this new opportunity instead? Manual work in spreadsheets is not the most efficient way to run the business of marketing or get quick answers in real time for marketing leadership. We want to help the MOPS team get out from under the weight of those spreadsheets and have a seat at the table where they help CMOs make informed strategic decisions. We hope some of these insights from these MOPS professionals will be helpful as you elevate your MOPS team.
So what mistakes do MarTech vendors commonly make during the sales process? What mistakes don't they make? Might be no, I'm just half joking. I mean, I think the main issue, and this is not unique really to MarTech vendors, but probably to sellers generally, is that they don't understand their buyer, not on a deep, profound level. And there's a number of different factors that I think if sellers understood this about MarTech buyers, particularly the ops persona, who I think plays a prominent, if not the main role in buying MarTech, then they would have better results. The first one is that ops buyers are technical, and I think people know this conceptually, intellectually, but they don't actually reflect it in their sales process. So if you bring a technical buyer into a room and you spend half an hour, 45 minutes on a PowerPoint, they're going to be bored. They don't want your fluffy slides. They don't care to hear the benefits that somebody has crafted. They're not interested in ROI calculations that they're not going to believe. They've got real problems to solve. So they want to get into your product. They want to see what's actually going on and understand how it works and understand how it's going to solve their problems. The other issue is not having the right people in the room. So there's no faster way to burn trust with an ops buyer than to have a demo with someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, or where the ops buyer feels that they are more knowledgeable than the person giving the demo. So you need somebody there, like a strong technical solutions engineer who knows the product, who understands the domain, and who can answer reasonable questions. It's not that they have to know everything, but if they're ignorant of the landscape, if they're ignorant of basic things that the buyer expects you to know, then you're not going to get a good reception. I think it's also important to understand that these buyers don't want to be sold to. They have problems to solve. These are problem-solving people. They're coming into the meeting because they have a business problem that they need a solution for in some way. So the best way to reach that buyer is to sell consultatively. And I have a lot of experience doing that because I was a consultant and I participated in that pre-sales process kind of as the engineer. So if you can come in, do real discovery on what those business problems are, not like superficial going through the motions questions, but actually get to the root of, all right, what are you actually trying to solve for on a business level? And then help them craft a solution to that problem and show them that your product is a viable solution. They have a lot of trust, and you're going to build a lot of credibility through doing that. The next thing to think about is that ops buyers can actually be your champion if you play your cards right. Really common mistake is that vendors try to do an end run around ops and sell directly to marketers or to people they perceive as going to be the end users. Ops people, they're not going to take kindly to that. They're going to dig in their heels because they're going to have marketing coming to them with this vendor, and ops is going to immediately, it's like a porcupine, all the quills are going to come out. They're going to say, no, they're going to slam the brakes on however they can. But if you can go to an ops buyer and show them that there's value, really get them excited about your product, you'll actually have the opposite beneficial result, which is that they will be your biggest advocate internally. I'm able to sell your product inside my company way more effectively than you are every day of the week. I know who the stakeholders are. I know what the buttons I need to push to get people to become aligned around the need for that product. But you have to get me on board first. And then the last thing to think about when it comes to the ops buyer is that they have been burned many, many times. On the heart of every ops buyer is deep scars and wounds from failed products that did not live up to the hype from salespeople that oversold, that misrepresented, pushed the truth a little bit. And so they're wary. They are going to have a hard time trusting again. I have a deep skepticism of all martech vendors and salespeople, and that's just through those negative cycles that I've just described. So don't misrepresent what your product does. Don't overstate it. And if you lie, it's going to cost you way more business down the road in terms of bad word of mouth, because they're going to go into the nearest Slack and they're going to blow up your product and they're going to say, stay away from this vendor.
The first thing that sticks out to me is too many steps of discovery. And I don't know if you've experienced that or not, but it's like, I think the most discovery calls I've ever had before actually entering a sales process was 4. And it was like, it was a lot. I remember this one, it was like call number 3. And I was like, we're so excited to see the demo. I brought like 4 team members on the call, and they're like, oh, this is just like a discovery call. And I'm like, why?
Oh my God.
And it's like, you don't forget those things. And sometimes it can, I think it can kind of hurt your outlook on not like the business, but just like, gosh, I just wanted a demo. I just wanted to talk about the solution. I've had some other friends in ops tell me that they have told a vendor, like, I have budget, I know I want to buy your solution, I'm ready, and they've been disqualified. They're like, oh, we're not the right solution for you. And I think that's another big mistake that vendors will make, is like disqualifying someone because they don't fit like what, ICP should be. And like, that's okay to vet and like qualify, but not when someone says, I have budget, you're my vendor, I'm ready to go. You do all the discovery, not doing needs assessment like properly. If someone's wanting to like know certain parts of the solution, like give them those certain parts of the solution, like kind of go through those things. But if someone says, I want like an overview of the entire platform just to understand holistically everything it can do, I've been told before, well, we don't want to do that. We just want to show you what's relevant to you. And it's like, what? So that's another one I almost forgot about.
That is bad, because sometimes you don't know what
you don't know what you don't know.
You don't even know what's even possible. I'm like, what? This coat goes inside out too? I didn't know I needed that option.
Right. If someone wants a general demo,
one,
like show a little bit of everything. But yeah, those are the top things that I think come to mind. And it's hard because like, I think of myself, like I'm not the buyer a lot of the time. Like I am trying to, vet and like pull solutions together. And I'm trying to realistically think about like, what am I capable of implementing well for my team?
Yeah.
And so part of that is like how good the integrations are. And it's like, if there's certain information that I want to know before I pull the whole team in, like you got to give ops folks that information. That way they know, like, because if the integration is complicated and you don't have an overly technical ops person, like I don't see myself as overly technical. I've got technical chops, but not like in depth, like I can't code or anything the way some of my colleagues can. But it's like understand, like meeting people where they are, like trying to level with them and make sure that it's a good fit across the board.
Yeah, not only implementation, but maintaining.
Yeah.
Like what the effort is to maintaining this tool within the stack for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if it falls off, like after onboarding is done, like then you're looking at another possible churn too.
One of the things I hate most is I have people on the team that vet, that do the research, that want to find the solutions that work best for us and then present it to the right stakeholders. And of course, I understand the value of multi-threading as well. Salespeople want to, get at all the people in the buying committee, reach out to them, but I am busy. So I'm like, I trust my team, like they're out there, and I get all the calls, hey, let's meet. I'm like, aren't you already meeting with somebody on my team? Like, why are you hassling me now?
I know. I get there's wanting to make sure you're communicating with everyone in the buying group, but also understand like there's a person that is in charge of homework, like, and they will pull in other people whenever they're ready to pull in the rest of the team.
Yeah, because I always like reply.
You have to trust the prospect a little bit too,
Yeah, I reply and I add them. I'm like, I think you're already talking to, person X. And you can
Continue
continue to have that
conversation.
lovely conversation without me. Yeah.
Having been around at the dinosaur age of marketing automation, I have seen all of the sales pitches and heard all of the promises and, seen all of, no, not all of the impacts that customers experience, but a lot of the different impacts where, the steak and the sizzle are in different, not only different time zones, but different galactic areas. But I think one of the most interesting things from my experience was having the opportunity to see the inside of the Marketo sales cycle when I was lucky enough to be working at Marketo. And because of the role that I had, there were a few enterprise salespeople who invited me to speak with prospects. And I can say that there were two paths that would occur after a salesperson would initially invite me to have a conversation with one of their prospects. They were always on those calls. And there were a few salespeople with whom I had only a single call with a prospect because they would bring the prospect onto the call. I would speak with the prospect and I would talk about the complexity. I would talk about some of the challenges. I would talk about my experience in the consulting business. I would talk about examples where customers didn't know what they were buying and then they had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get their implementation to work the way that they wanted it to. And those salespeople who involved me and then were like, I never want you on a call with my prospects ever again, were not the better high performing salespeople. The salespeople who brought me into sales cycles repeatedly, and I would tell the story and talk about the complexity, deals progressed. It was actually an important factor for them in their sales cycle. And I think that's kind of the different perspective. That's the two different approaches. One is overselling the promise and not understanding the scenario. So, yes, different automation tools can do really phenomenal things, but a lot of those phenomenal things are heavily dependent on resources and data. And if you're selling into a company that lacks one or both of those, and they buy your product isn't going to deliver on its promises because it lacks the support from data and resources that it needs. But then you have sales cycles where the salesperson does very strong due diligence and is very upfront with the customer or the prospective customer about the complexities, about what it will take to unlock some of the promises that the technology makes. And those eyes wide open type sales cycles are the ones that I think the customers are much more appreciative of because they feel respected, they feel included, and they feel that they're going to get the result in the end that they're looking for. Be very clear, be very upfront about what the customer has to bring to unlock the capabilities that are the sizzle for the steak, because inevitably, if you don't do that, you might get the commission, and if that's your only guiding principle, you'll have a flash in the pan sales career. But those people who are long-term enterprise salespeople are very transparent and very clear about the complexity and excited about it. It isn't a scary thing. It is what it takes. And if a customer knows that up front, then the customer comes committed to the result, and customers can be a lot closer to getting that result. So that's my soapbox on that.
Our CEO says all the time to embrace the customer's complexity as well. And being forthright. I mean, people talk to their peers, right? About great or not so great experiences that they've had. So being upfront is definitely important, and understanding the reality of their homework.
And I think in our space, the questions surrounding privacy and privacy compliance need to be addressed very early in marketing technology sales cycles now, because as we see vendors rolling new capabilities into their platforms, those new capabilities may not be in compliance with the purchasing company's policies. And so, in that deep due diligence, I think, involving those privacy teams very early in that sales cycle is an important factor when you're dealing with that whole area and space related to, consent and preference management, machine learning and AI, transformation of data. Like, all of that space is an important space to involve in the sales cycle, because if the transaction is going to fail at the privacy and finance phase of the procurement cycle, it's best to know that early. I have also seen very good salespeople walk away from sales cycles saying, we're not a good fit. This is not the solution that you need. It doesn't address the problem that you're looking to solve. And those are the kinds of relationship selling experiences that I think everybody appreciates. And I have seen those sales cycles turn around where a sales cycle was started and the salesperson said, this isn't going to do what you need. It isn't going to solve the core problem that you've said you have. And a year or two later, when that customer grows and the development of requirements and the size of the implementation, the path does lead them to a more complex solution. It does lead them to a larger scale need. And then the sales cycle came back and the transaction occurred. But, it's those very clear, honest approach sellers that I think are really good.
One of the first mistakes I see companies make, martech vendors start selling to other departments and they don't bring marketing ops into the conversation early enough. That's going to really piss off the marketing ops team. So, and I see it happen actually more often than not, because as a salesperson, they're like, hey, we don't want to make the sales cycle more complicated than it needs to be. Let's only bring them in when they need to. Another mistake I see, that if the marketing ops person is the person that's in the sales cycle and that's doing the due diligence with it, making it so difficult to get an expert on the phone. A lot of times the sales guys don't know what they're talking about. Like, they're selling the software, but they don't know it deeply enough in order to talk to a subject matter expert like a marketing ops person. And oftentimes there's so much friction, which is probably my third point, is that there's so much friction between that process still today. Companies have made strides against it. Like, some companies that are smart have, removed the SDR being the filter before you get to the AE, so that you can start having a real conversation. But even the AEs are usually not subject matter experts. And so getting a MOPS person in touch with someone like that, really hard to do. Big mistake I think that vendors do. Don't make it so difficult. Just connect people. Oftentimes martech vendors will talk about all of the features when they are demoing it, and they don't really narrow in on what the customer wants. This sounds basic and sounds like something that sales should have learned in 101 selling class, but it still comes up time and time again. They'll start a presentation. They start talking about the company, how awesome they are. They'll maybe ask the customer like one or two questions, and then they just keep going and saying, hey, look at all of these things, and overwhelming their prospect with all of the features that their product can do. It's not a right way to sell a product.
They're not listening. Like, if you're asking me a question to understand me, I assume you're going to then take that knowledge and intelligence and then deliver something to meet those needs, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's like they're going through I'll ask you the question, then here's my script that I use for everybody. Like, what? Hear what I mentioned there? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not hard. Just be a human, be empathetic. So if you have empathy, then you actually care about the person on the other side and trying to solve their problem, which honestly, I think you'll sell more anyways if you're focused on your customer as opposed to your script. I know companies will do that. They'll create those sales scripts just because they're like, hey, this works. This is what our top performing rep does. So everybody, you need to follow this script. But I actually think the best reps are the ones that break the script. They'll use it as a format, but they'll break the script and become a human and actually listen to their prospects.
So I feel like the first obvious thing to say is martech vendors love to sell the dream and don't love to sell the reality.
Yes, I've heard that.
Always do whatever it is we ask them to do, right? Can you make it fly? Sure. Like they overpromise, and it is to the detriment, I think, of actually our industry, if I'm being honest with you. I think that sometimes marketing ops professionals get pressure to do a lot within the marketing tool.
Yeah.
One of my sayings is it comes from system theory. The system does what the system was built for, right? That look at what it does and that's what it's for. And we love to kind of break that, right? Like, can it do this and can it do that? Like I don't know how many people I've like seen like bust out a MailChimp and like have all these integrations, and it's like it's just meant to send emails. Like, stop trying to make it a CRM. That's not what it's for. That's why it's broken. Right.
Right.
And I think that like with certain vendors, they want to be everything to everybody. So they've broken out their systems and it's not originally what it was designed for. Just be the excellent of what you are, and don't try to compete with a Salesforce and compete with an Adobe. They're them because that's what they do great, right? You're not going to beat them at that. So the other point for vendors to keep in mind when they're selling is every vendor I've ever spoken to has focused on ROI, like what's the return on the tool that you're looking for? What ROI are you trying to get to? And I think that sets up vendors for failure. Your tool cannot get me more ROI. It can't make me money. That's not what you guys do. Stop doing that. I think it sets them up for failure, because when I get the tool and then I don't get the ROI because I haven't gotten my strategy aligned, I don't have the resources in place, I haven't got my content together, like things that are internal that have nothing to do with your tool. When that falls apart, we're going to blame you because you promised this ROI when you have nothing to do with how that is executed whatsoever. So stop doing that. I feel like vendors need to find other metrics or other areas to focus on that they can improve and can help implement that are not that. So like, I appreciate that, yes, all of us at MOPS are held accountable in some way for some sort of revenue metric, whether it be pipeline creation or lead gen or whatever. That is part of our job. But your tool is not going to be the thing that solves that. It never was going to be. I know vendors don't like to offer it because they think it's a money loss, but back when I started with, the Eloquas and the Marketos of the world, the customer success person guided you through optimizing your system. That's what they were there for. You had monthly conversations and they made sure that your lead scoring was set up. They made sure that your routing was set up. They made sure that certain things were in place so that you could be successful. And we don't have that anymore. So it's a lot of like, figure it out on your own. Go talk. Here's this resource library. Reach out to support. There's not somebody holding your hand with services. So it's like, if we can get back to vendors offering that, I think the ones that do see the success of their tool. I feel for people getting into MOPS today and just learning from absolute scratch on how to do some of these things, because when I was new into MOPS and learning these tools, there was somebody to kind of hold my hand and guide me through. I wasn't just thrown a resource library or a support form to go figure it out. I think it's kind of unfair to the MOPS person these days, I feel for them.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of MarTech vendors make mistakes where they just ultimately just give into the price discussion, and they're so desperate to get the sale that they're going to budge on price. And this set actually works really well for the buyer's perspective, because you get a deal. But ultimately, MarTech vendors do make a mistake in this because they're really not selling the value of their product. And ultimately, they end up paying for this later, because if the buyer doesn't understand the value of the solution and they're buying based on price, then most likely the adoption is going to be very limited, because if they value it, they're going to be willing to pay a premium, and they're going to essentially put the resources into the adoption of the product. They're going to, they're going to hire martech staff that are experts in the solution. They're going to fully train their teams, and they're going to engage more with that customer success manager and build that really tight consultative relationship with them. The other mistake I see in the customer success part is where customer success is given a quote. And customer success is essentially customer success in name only, where this may be a renewals rep. They may also have a bag. And this is really tempting for vendors because they're thinking about revenue across the chain. Across the supply chain, they're thinking about revenue. But what they don't realize is that there is a period of time where you do need to make sure that the customer is adopting, and you have to gain trust in order to do that. And in order to gain trust, you have to have somebody in that seat that's working with the vendor, or with that buyer, that the buyer believes has their best interest at heart. And if we believe that they're basically there just to sell us and just to discover how much extra they can sell us, or they kind of ghost us for most of the experience and then they show up when the renewal is there, that's not a good experience. And that is definitely a common mistake I see in the sales process is, putting customer success in charge of that renewal. And I've seen a lot of breakpoints as a buyer in this last part of the process where the process for dealing with a client's legal department, if you don't have a good deal desk process that involves your legal team and being responsive to the buyer, that can definitely slow down the process, and it can create a bad taste in the buyer's mouth.